The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Aragon LQ Pre-Harvest Weed Control, and Cruiser Max Vibrance Beans.
Bernard Tobin here on the Soybean School. Today I'm joined by Rob Miller from BASF. Rob, how's it going?
Pretty good. How you doing, Bern?
I'm pretty good. I can't go wrong here. 1st of September, calendar's turned. I think we've got to talk about pre-harvest burn down in soybeans. And hey, when that conversation starts, it's really two parts, isn't it? Desiccation and weed control.
Yes, absolutely. So as we start to get into September, we're seeing some cooler nights. The crop has really progressed very quickly, and we're looking at drying down this crop, but also looking at how do we control some of these problem weeds like the one I have right here.
Yeah. So hey, let's talk, before we talk about this fella, let's talk about restrictions here, especially when it comes to things like glyphosate and how you manage dry beans.
Absolutely. So whether it's dry beans or soybeans, you always want to check with your processor. Especially for the dry bean market, there's a lot of restrictions when it comes to glyphosate use, but also another product like Ignite, there's also more and more restrictions for that. So that's where you always want to check with your processor, especially for dry beans. But when it comes to soybeans and even some IP soybeans, I'm hearing rumblings that there are some restrictions for that as well. So yeah, that's the main take home.
Keep an eye on that. Hey, let's talk about timing and staging here. Obviously you want to be applying at the proper time. What are we looking for?
Absolutely. So if you're using a product like Aragon LQ, the application timing is 90% of the pods have changed color. So if you look at a pod here, you pull up a brown pod, you actually open it up, and where you actually see the seeds detached from the pod, that is how you know you're at that optimal stage. And patience is always going to be key. I know we want to get the wheat in the ground as fast as we can to maximize our yield potential for the wheat, but that's where you're better off to spray it a little bit on the later side, get better coverage, especially if there are some glyphosate restrictions as well. We need to get better coverage of this stem, so it's better to wait for some to have some leaves actually drop. We get better coverage, and that's where you get more consistent control.
So Rob, a couple tips to talk about here, especially as you head into the field, harvesting tips. Tell us a little bit about pre-harvest interval and how important that is.
Absolutely. So again, a product like Aragon, if you're with dry beans, it's 2 days. If it's soybeans, it's 3 days. If you add in the glyphosate in there, and we always recommend glyphosate if there are no glyphosate restrictions, pre-harvest interval is 7 days. So that's where you always have to keep in mind. Water volume is going to be key, especially this year's crop, very thick canopies, minimum 20 gallons per acre. You can even go up to 25. Some growers even do 30 gallons per acre on some of those thick canopies. More of a medium to coarse droplet size. You're not using the really large ultra coarse droplets. You want to make sure you get good coverage, get coverage of the stem as well as the entire plant. And if you're looking at some of these larger weeds like this, that's where the boom height is also going to be very important as well.
What about time of day? What about field conditions?
Absolutely. So a day like today, nice, bright, sunny, hot, those are ideal conditions for a product like Aragon. You don't want to spray in early morning. You want to avoid dews. You want to avoid evening spraying, overcast days as well. You're better off to wait a couple days for those ideal conditions. You'll notice a dramatic difference if you just wait those couple extra days for ideal spray conditions.
Yeah. Okay, Rob, final question. That is about weed control here. It's opportunities to take care of some issues, you know, going forward to next year. When I look around here, 1st of September, I see an awful lot of leaf drop. I think this is going to be a pretty open fall. We're going to see a lot of soil.
Yes, for sure. So, you know, these leaves have dropped a couple weeks ahead of schedule, what they normally do. More open ground, more sunlight hitting that soil surface, and that's where we start to see the more perennial weeds start to germinate. Those winter annuals, the candiflebanes, the chickweeds, the perennial sow thistles. Those ones can actually germinate a little bit earlier, and if you don't control them this fall, they will be monsters to control in the springtime.
Yeah. Talk about what you can learn this year now, obviously looking at, you know, what's in your fields, the program you started with in the spring. You know, what can we take forward to next year?
Yeah, a couple of things that we learned this year. Multiple effective modes of action, especially when controlling candiflebane, using at least 2 modes of action to control this beast. And overall, we had some pretty good success this year. Another thing we learned this year, Waterhemp. Received a lot of questions the last couple of weeks on Waterhemp, starting to germinate in some fields below the soybean canopies. But I think when we look back to the springtime, the biggest weed that we had the most questions on was perennial sow thistle, especially in the corn crop. And the best way to control perennial sow thistle is in the fall. So let's take that time to control it, whether it's after the crop has come off, in the crop. Fall weed control is going to be key to control some of these problem weeds. And it probably will take a couple of years to control it. Not just one application in the fall will completely control everything.
Yeah, got to have a good strategy. Rob, thanks for stopping by. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.